Alrighty, so in this video, I'm going to start building out a router. Now, I want this router to do a couple of things. First off, I want to be able to create our API endpoints through it. Secondly, I also want to be able to create an auto router. So, what that means is if we go into our browser here, you see this post slash and then an ID. I want to be able to call a controller, and I also want to be able to call an action from that controller. So an example of a controller would be home. And then in that home, we could have an index action. And so essentially, all this is we call the controller and then a function from that controller. So this index action would be called just by calling home, and by default it would route to that index action. But let's say we want to have a post, and we want to view a specific post, so we do slash post, and then we do an ID of that post, right? Well, we want to pull up that post, so it would reference this post controller, and then we could pass a variable into the index action to view this post. But let's say we want to get a list of posts where we can view all of them. So this view would be an action. So it'd be posts slash view would be so post controller view action. But I also want to, as I said, I wanted to create our API. So let's say we have a user's endpoint.php. Well, I want to be able to do something like PHP, and then we can do, if you've ever used the JavaScript style APIs like from Next.js um, actually Next is the easiest way. You can do a function like $API is equal to new API, or not new API, new router, and then you can do $API get, and it would reference a get function, and then you could pass in your own function, and then if you really wanted to, you could pass in a payload after that as well. So we can do just in different like auth, and then pass an array of username is admin. Oh, just realized this is not an object, but there we go. You can do username is equal to admin like that. And so and then you could pass in this function here where you can add a bunch of return values, and it would get this. So let's say that you want to return a db get users, and then you pass in this username like that. That's essentially how I want to be able to use the API. Obviously, we don't have a username, so this is all going to error out, but that's how I would want the API to work. So then when you're in the browser, or if you're doing like a JavaScript function and you want to call the API, you can do localhost /API/ users. And then you can pass in anything you want. So users, you can pass in the username, such as that, or you can pass in the user ID, whatever you want. So in order to do it like that, we're going to have to write a bunch of protected functions. So I'm just going to delete this users file real quick. And I'm going to go back to our core folder, and I'm going to create a new file called router.php. And actually, this is going to be router.core.php because, again, I'm using that naming convention. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to open up our PHP here, and I'm going to create a protected $_ need to open up the class first. So or define the class. Class is equal to router. Jeez. Oh, and then create this protected $_ Set that equal to an empty array. And then I'm also going to do $_ payload and also set that equal to an empty array. Okay, so the easiest way to do this is I'm going to create some of these functions here. All these are going to be setters. It's just it'll be easier to explain once I write them. So public function get path callback and then payload. Okay, and then $this_routes is equal to routes and then it's path callback. Oh, I don't want to explain that. I'm just having trouble today. Okay. And then I can just copy and paste this 4 times. It post put notes. Okay. So essentially what these functions will do is in JavaScript you can create the different requests. So like let's say you're using jQuery and you use a GET request or a POST request. You can post to that. So on our endpoint, when we create this, let's say POST request, it creates this routes array and creates this post path, and then it adds the path to the post request there and allows us to create this callback, which when you saw whenever I created that user's file, that's essentially what I did with the function. And so this post here, in fact, we'll leave it like this for now, but we may have to change this later to something to a little be just a little bit different. We might have to tweak it, but for now we'll leave it like this, and then if we have to tweak it later, we will. I'm also going to create a payload function, public function get payload, and then all this is just going to be a getter, so we're going to return $this_payload. Okay. Now here comes the hard part. We're going to be creating a bunch of protected, or actually before we create the protected, we're going to create 2 more helper functions. So public function, and I'm going to call this push. And all this is going to take in a path. And we're just going to return the header function. And it's going to take in a location and then the path. And we'll take this one step farther, actually. We'll determine if this is using, if we want to use HTTP. You know what? We'll just always use HTTPS:// and then the path. And then we'll also create a local redirect. So public function redirects, and this will take in a location, and then we'll just return the header location slash and then $sign location. So this will just redirect our page. Okay. So now we're going to create some protected functions. Protected function invoke callback, and it's going to take a callback. And so we're going to check if is underscore callable for the callback. And if it is, we're just going to call the user func and $sign callback. And then we'll close this if statement, and we'll do an else statement, $sign, and we'll create this function in just a moment. Okay, so this function doesn't exist yet, but as I said, we'll create it in just a moment. We're going to create one more handle callback function real quick. Protected function invoke callback. But this time we're going to add with arguments, and this is just going to take a callback and args, and we're going to see if is underscore callable for the callback. If it is, we're going to call the call underscore user underscore func array with the arguments of callback. Else, we're going to just say that this handle not found. Now, we're going to create that handle not found function. And actually, before we do that handle not found function, we're going to create one more function. So that way I'm not creating a bunch of like reused code. I'm going to call this public, no, it's going to be a protected function. And we're going to call this get controller. And this will take a $sign controller and $sign action. And so we're just going to say if and then file underscore exists. And then we're going to say best way to do this con dot $sign controller dot $sign controller and then dot controller dot php. So if that file exists, what we're gonna do is we're also gonna check if a if the file exists, then we'll check to see if, and then not $sign, if class exists, $sign controller, and that's not an and the method exists. We're going to say new $sign controller, $sign action. So if both of those exist, why is it giving me an error? Okay. So if both of those exist, we're going to say that $sign controller instance is equal to new $sign controller. And then we're going to say $sign this invoke callback. Or actually, there's a better way to do this. We're gonna say we're gonna use args, and we're gonna set that to false by default. So if this use args, if it's not fossil, it'll be equal to an array. So what we'll do is if not, or if use underscore or use callback, or not use callback, use args, and is underscore array, use args. What we'll do is we'll do this invoke callback with, and then we'll say $ this, invoke callback with arguments, and then $controller instance action use args. If it's else, what we'll do is we'll just say $this, invoke callback, and then $controller instance action, like that. And then what we can do is we can also say that just action. You know what? We'll do this on the function level, actually, for the actual function. So now what we can do is we can do protected function handle not found. So what we're gonna do is on the handle not found, we're going to do HTT. Well, first we're gonna say that we're gonna get $this, get controller, and then all we're gonna do is we're gonna say let's see, not page not found, and then we'll use the index action. So index action, and then we're not going to use a callback on this one or a args, so we're not going to pass anything through it. So we'll end the function here. Now we're going to have to kill the function, otherwise it's just going to create a never-ending loop, and it's just going to cause a massive error. So what we're going to do is we're going to say http underscore response code is equal to 404, and then we're going to echo 404 page not found, and then we're going to kill the page. Otherwise, it's just because we don't have the functionality to make our controllers and stuff work, it's just going to create an endless loop and crash the server itself. So we're going to just kill the page there, so that way it exits this loop. Because essentially what would happen is, because we have no logic for our controllers to actually function, it would call this handle not found function, which would call this get controller function, which would invoke the argument or invoke the callback. But because it's invoking the callback, but there's also nothing that's callable, it's going to handle this not found function, which is going to handle the controller function, which again is going to invoke callback, and it's just going to keep doing that over and over again until the application crashes, up until we actually write the logic for this controller for the models views and controllers. So for now, we're going to just kill the page and then come back to this once the page is ready for this. Now that that's done, we're actually not finished with this file at all. We still have a few more functions that we need to write, which one is to have the auto routing or handle our auto routing. and then we also need to handle our API endpoints, and then we also need to handle the router itself, and then call the function. So, with all that said, in the next episode, we're going to continue this, building out this router. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.